Hey guys, tonight we're diving nose first into a world without showers, shampoo, or that sweet smell of your favorite body wash. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where hygiene wasn't just an afterthought, it was practically a rumor. Imagine waking up on a straw-stuffed mattress, your breath thick with the scent of last night's onion soup, and something that might be mold. Your teeth? Let's just say you're lucky to have any. And as for your gums, they're less healthy pink and more angry burgundy. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is there, whether it's a midnight unwind or a lazy afternoon nap. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You yawn and stretch, the cool medieval morning air sneaking through the cracks in your wooden cottage wall. Your mouth feels fuzzy. That's not a metaphor. There's actual fuss. Brushing your teeth isn't part of your morning routine because, well, there isn't one. The closest thing to dental hygiene is rubbing your gums with a frayed twig, or if you're feeling fancy, dipping it in salt and ashes. Historians still argue whether this primitive method actually did anything, or just scratched plaque around with flair. And toothpaste? Forget it. If you wanted a minty finish, you'd need actual mint, and good luck finding that in February unless you're besties with a local herbalist. Chewing herbs or crunchy bread crusts was sometimes used to scrape the teeth, which feels about as effective as brushing with croutons. You glance around your village and realize everyone else is in the same breath boat. Personal space doesn't exist, so you're face to face with foulness pretty often. Social life in medieval Europe meant dodging eye contact and inhaling through your mouth. Ironic, given the breath situation. Historians believe halitosis was probably universal, making morning breath a permanent condition. Dating must have been an olfactory challenge. Now let's talk about teeth, those poor, overworked chewing stones in your mouth. Sugar isn't rampant yet, which spares you from the modern cavity crisis, but dental pain is still a regular guest. No toothbrushes, no dentist, just a priest and some pliers if a tooth went rogue. If you're lucky, the village barber might yank it out between haircuts and bloodletting. Multitasking at its medieval finest. Dental health wasn't cosmetic. It was survival. Infections from a single bad tooth could go septic, and there was no magical antibiotic to save you. One 13th century text recommended applying roasted onions mixed with honey to a toothache, which probably smelled better than it worked. Another cure: stuffing your ear with garlic to draw out the pain. Not the tooth, just the pain. Logic was a little looser back then. Now, if you're thinking, surely rich people had toothpaste. I hate to break it to you, they just had better smelling ways to ignore the rot. Nobles sometimes rinsed with wine or vinegar, which feels aggressive, but they swore by it. And bizarrely, some aristocrats used ground-up coral or crushed oyster shells as an abrasive. Fancy? Absolutely. Effective? Possibly. Dangerous to enamel? Most definitely. Some ancient remedies claim that burning a hedgehog and grinding its ashes with honey created a kind of magical dental powder. Quirky, yes. Useful. That depends on whether you trust your teeth to a scorched woodland critter. Meanwhile, kissing customs reflected the breath situation. Romantic gestures were more about hand-holding and shared glances than locking lips, because if someone leaned in too close, they might never lean out again. You pull your ruffled cloak tighter and step outside. Smoke from hearth fires curls through the village, mingling with something distinctly Europe. That's your neighbor who hasn't bathed since the last festival. But we'll get to that steaming detail soon. For now, let's linger in this delightful corner of medieval discomfort, your mouth a medieval cave of secrets. Historians still argue whether tooth decay was as rampant among the peasantry as we assume. Some say the coarse diet kept teeth relatively clean, Others point to skeletal remains with smile lines carved in cavities. And dental tools. If you're expecting metal picks or floss, lower your standards. The best you've got is maybe a piece of linen for wiping and a prayer to Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of dental agony. Her followers believed she could ease the pain if you lit a candle and mumbled some Latin while pacing in circles. Again, no proof it worked, but it did pass the time. So, as you lean over the splintery basin with a wooden cup of cold, slightly questionable water, you sigh and give your gums a half-hearted rub. The sensation is about as satisfying as scratching a mosquito bite through a sweater. You spit, and a small clump of something lands with a thud. You hope it was food. It wasn't. Welcome to the mouth of the Middle Ages. You step outside, and the morning air greets you like a damp wool blanket, cool, a little smoky, and tinged with something pungent. A soft mist lingers above the muddy road, and you hear the splash of hooves in a puddle. But you're not out for a walk. You're heading to the local bathhouse, where you can finally pretend to be clean. Sort of. The bathhouse is easy to find. Just follow the steam and the sound of shouting. You trudge toward it, sidestepping a chicken and narrowly avoiding something suspiciously squishy. The building itself leans a little, made of timber and plaster, with smoke curling from the chimney like a lazy dragon's breath. Inside, the scent is a potent mix of wood smoke, stale herbs, sweat, and hope. You push the door open, and instantly the warmth washes over you. Naked bodies and clouds of steam fill the room. Everyone's in here. Young, old, toothless, hairy. Modesty hasn't been invented yet. You find a bench and try not to stare as a baker scrubs his armpits with a coarse cloth and a little lump of soap made from animal fat and lye. It smells faintly of boiled goat. Bathhouses like this were surprisingly popular in medieval towns. Public bathing wasn't just tolerated, it was fashionable, especially in the 12th and 13th centuries. People came here to wash, gossip, flirt, and occasionally get massages that involved more than sore shoulders. Historians still argue whether bathhouses were more like spas or low-key brothels. The truth is probably a steamy blend of both. You dip your foot into the hot communal tub and wince. It's hot, but not exactly clean. The water's been reused more than you'd like to think about. Some bathhouses change water once a day, others only once a week. You try not to think about the guy with the rash who got out just as you got in. Soap, when available, was harsh. Lye-based and alkaline, it stung your eyes and left your skin dry and a little red. Herbalists sometimes added rosemary or lavender if you could afford it. But for most people, washing meant scrubbing raw with coarse cloths, rinsing in tepid water, and praying you didn't contract a fungal infection in the process. And it wasn't just about personal hygiene. Medieval folks believed that balancing the humors in your body required keeping it warm and moist, which made baths feel like medicine. Some physicians prescribed bathing for melancholy or headaches. Others warned against it, fearing open pores would invite disease. It was a coin flip. Bathe and feel refreshed, or bathe and die of plague. Speaking of the plague, once that unwelcome guest rolled into town in the mid-14th century, bathhouses started to clear out. People grew suspicious of steam, sweat, and social soaking. They believed the air miasma, as they called it, carried disease. And what creates more miasma than a crowded, humid bathhouse? So naturally, they started avoiding them. Historians still argue whether this retreat from bathing was fear-driven or just an excuse to stop washing. Before the plague paranoia, though, bathhouses were often open until late. You could bathe by candlelight, sipping weak ale while a scrawny man named Henrik rubbed your back with a horsehair mitt. Sometimes entire families came together, like a medieval version of a spa day, with more body hair and fewer robes. And yes, there were rules. Men and women usually bathed at different times, or in different rooms, though exceptions happened. Some places offered private stalls, luxurious little cubbies where things often got extracurricular. That's where the brothel part comes in. Many bathhouses doubled as pleasure houses, and if you asked for a special oil treatment, well, you weren't leaving squeaky clean. You dunk your head under the water and come up sputtering, eyes stinging slightly from the soap residue. The wooden slats above are blackened from years of steam, and the air smells like damp wool and herbal smoke. The serving girl walks by with a tray of mulled wine. You sip and try not to think about all the skin particles floating around you. Cleanliness was cultural, but also seasonal. People bathed more in spring and summer when it was easier to heat water and not freeze to death during the drying off phase. Winter bathing. Rare unless you were extremely brave or extremely smelly. You glance to the corner where a physician is soaking his feet in a bucket, reading a worn Latin manuscript. He tells anyone who'll listen that warm water opens the skin to let evil spirits out. A monk nearby mutters that it also lets them in. The two glare at each other over the steam, continuing a centuries-long debate about whether bathing heals or harms. Some bathhouses try to step up their game with scented herbs and pleasant music. The wealthiest patrons could request oil rubs, hot towels, and even servants to scrape off their dead skin with small knives, called strigils, a holdover from Roman times. Not exactly a loofah, but it got the job done. You emerge from the tub red-faced and steamy, your skin tingling from scrubbing and heat. You wrap yourself in a rough linen towel that's seen better decades and step into the cooling area, a drafty room with benches and the faint scent of smoked fish. A woman next to you picks slice out of her son's hair with a carved wooden comb. The child giggles and scratches. We'll get to him soon. Outside, the world feels brighter after a bath, even if you're still technically kind of dirty. But by medieval standards, you're radiant. You walk home, hair damp, feet cleanish, and chest warmed by herbal wine. You might not know it, but this bathhouse ritual could be the highlight of your week. Just try not to think about the last time they drained that tub. The bathhouse fog fades as you shuffle home, still damp under your wool tunic, and hoping you don't pick up more grime than you just shed. But now it's laundry day, or rather laundry time, because the concept of a fixed schedule hasn't quite caught on in your village. Laundry happens when you run out of wearable cloth, or when the smell gets personal. You lug a bundle of grimy garments to the stream that cuts through the outer edge of town, its sluggish flow more brown than blue. This isn't some sparkling alpine brook. It's where people draw water, dump waste, water animals, and yes, wash clothes. You kneel on a mossy stone, your knees already complaining, and unravel your week's worth of tunics, undersmocks, and linen underclothes. The scent that hits you, earthy, sour, and vaguely like regret. Washing isn't glamorous. There's no soap dispenser or convenient washboard. You grab a wooden paddle and begin the rhythmic slap, slap, slap against a flat rock. The idea is to beat the dirt out, though honestly, it feels like you're just rearranging it. Soap, if you have any, is homemade and comes in uneven chunks, a pungent combo of animal fat, lye, and sometimes ashes or herbs. It burns slightly if you've got scratches on your hands. You do. Women usually dominate laundry work, and it's oddly social. Next to you, 3 other villagers gossip between slaps. Did you hear that Agnes let her pig sleep inside the bed again? One huffs. And with guests over, another adds scandalized. The conversation drifts between family feuds, weird smells, and suspicions about the baker's sudden wealth. Classic medieval talk show. As you scrub, the stream carries suds and loose threads downstream to the cows drinking just around a bend. Hopefully they like the taste of rosemary soap, because that's all you had left. Clothes are mostly made from wool and linen. Cotton was rare and expensive, imported from faraway lands. Linen, made from flax, was used for undergarments and bedding because it was lighter and easier to clean. But even clean was relative. After washing, you wring out the soaked garments and drape them over bushes, branches, or crude wooden racks to dry. On a sunny day, they steam a little. On a rainy one, they just get wetter. And don't think laundry was frequent. For most folks, especially peasants, washing clothes happened maybe once a month. Underwear, if you wore any, got priority, and outer garments went longer between washes. You might spot a noble's gown being aired out rather than scrubbed, perfumed with rosewater instead of soaked in soap. Historians still argue whether elite clothing was too delicate for washing, or if nobles simply preferred to mask odors with spices and prayers. Occasionally, you'd bleach linens by soaking them in urine. Yes, urine. Stale human pee, collected in a clay pot and lovingly referred to as chamber lye. The ammonia in it made a decent cleaning agent, and some towns even taxed the collection of urine for industrial use. Nothing like laundering with bodily fluids to put things in perspective. There's also the question of drying. You want the clothes dry, but not stolen. Laundry theft was a surprisingly common crime. A good, warm tunic took hours to make and days to embroider, so if someone pinched it off your drying line, they didn't just steal fabric, they stole a week of your life. So you keep a close eye on your damp, shapeless pile, swatting at flies and trying to guess which of your neighbors looks the most suspicious. Once dryish, your clothes are stiff from the lye soap and smell like sun, grass, and faint ammonia. You fold them into your basket, now significantly heavier, and start the walk back up the muddy path. Your arms ache, and your knees are damp. A horse trots past, spraying your ankle with a splash of something that isn't just water. You try not to think about it. That's a tomorrow problem. At home, you hang the remaining clothes inside near the hearth to finish drying. The heat helps, but so does the smoke, which masks any lingering stink. You poke your finger through a hole in your sock, sigh, and make a mental note to stitch it up with whatever thread you can find. Mending clothes is more common than replacing them. Most people own only a couple of outfits, and they wear them until the seams beg for mercy. Some wealthier households have full-time launderers, usually women who work dawn to dusk scrubbing their employers' linens. In cities, these washerwomen formed their own guilds and occasionally got into heated disputes over territory and price. One story tells of a brawl in 14th century Paris between rival laundry factions. You've never seen two women fight over a tunic before, but apparently it got dramatic. And then there's the fringe stuff, the quirky, often questionable laundry tricks. Some households believe that putting rosemary under drying clothes will protect the wearer from lice. Others thought rubbing garlic into socks kept away evil spirits. At least one text mentions drying underclothes in the moonlight to draw out wickedness. Sounds magical until it rains. As you pack away your laundry and flop down onto a creaky wooden bench, you take a deep breath. The cottage smells slightly better, even if you don't. The smoky hearth mingles with the scent of warm linen and old wool. There's a satisfaction in this kind of cleanliness, not pristine, not sparkly, but earned. You tug on your clean shirt, scratch your arm where the soap dried your skin, and grin. At least you're not the one who accidentally boiled their best tunic last week. Poor Edith. That thing shrank into a doll outfit. Your clothes are mostly dry, your hands are pruned, and your back is already complaining. But for a brief moment, everything feels tolerably fresh. Just don't breathe too deeply. You wake the next morning to the unmistakable sensation of something crawling. Not in your mind, on your actual scalp. You scratch absent-mindedly, then furiously. And there it is, the medieval morning ritual you didn't know you were part of, welcoming the lice back for their daily feast. Personal grooming in the Middle Ages is less a beauty routine and more a relentless war of attrition. Your enemy? Fleas, lice, nits, and the occasional tick. all expertly adapted to living in your hair, your clothes, and occasionally your bed. You sit by the hearth, eyes half closed, as you reach for your best weapon, a long, slender-toothed comb carved from bone. It's not fancy, but it's your first line of defense. Lice combing is more effective than washing, especially considering how rarely you get to bathe. You drag the teeth slowly through your tangled hair, flinching each time you hear a tiny pop between the comb and your scalp. Next to you, your younger cousin uses her fingers to squish whatever the comb turns up. It's weirdly satisfying. Gross, yes, but satisfying. Everyone has lice. Nobles, monks, milkmaids. Even kings weren't spared. Some wore linen caps to trap the bugs overnight, then burn the caps in the morning. You can't afford to burn your only cap, so you just pick and flick, hoping the lice land in the hearth. There are fringe remedies, of course. Your aunt once tried rubbing crushed garlic into her scalp. She said it worked, though no one came near her for a week. Another woman swore by vinegar rinses, which may have helped, or just made her smell like medieval salad dressing. Historians still argue whether these homegrown techniques had real efficacy or just gave people a sense of control in a very itchy world. Fleas are less loyal to your scalp and more interested in your bedding. They lurk in straw mattresses, hop around the floor rushes, and occasionally make cameos during mealtimes. You remember your uncle once lighting sulfur in a clay bowl under the bed, hoping to smoke them out. Instead, he smoked out the dog and mildly gassed himself. Effective? Debatable. Entertaining? Absolutely. Your bed is a wooden frame, stuffed with straw that's been there far too long. The straw is supposed to be changed seasonally, but let's be honest, unless someone's sick or the mattress actually walks away on its own, that doesn't happen. So every night you're sharing it with an unseen population of six-legged roommates. And they're hungry. This is why grooming extends beyond just combing. You also check your clothes, especially the seams and folds, where body lice like to nest. You hold your shirt up to the light slanting through the shutters, and sure enough, there's movement. A quick shake over the fire, and a few of the hardier bugs go sizzling down into oblivion. Sleep tight. You own a small mirror, but it's made of polished metal, not glass. It shows you a vague reflection, enough to part your hair or pluck a nose hair, but not enough to see the panic in your eyes. Shaving is an option, but razors are expensive and dull quickly. Most men have beards out of convenience, not fashion. For women, plucking stray hairs with a tiny pair of tweezers, made of bone if you're lucky, is a weekly ordeal. One you endure grimacing in silence, while your cousin recounts the latest gossip about the cooper's wife and the monk with suspiciously soft hands. And yes, there are makeup practices, sort of. Nobles sometimes powder their faces with ground alabaster or lead-based concoctions to appear pale and delicate. That works great until you start developing lead poisoning. There's a running joke that a noble woman can either look flawless or breathe, but not both. Scent is a different story. Cleanliness might be relative, but smell is noticeable. People carry little cloth pouches of herbs, called pomanders, around their necks or tucked into belts. Lavender, sage, and rosemary are popular, not just for their calming aroma, but because they supposedly ward off illness. Whether they work or not, they definitely make you sneeze. You also use oils if you can afford them. Olive oil, walnut oil, or even bear fat rubbed into the hair can make it look less dry and brittle. It also makes you slightly flammable, so stay away from open flames. One local merchant swears by a blend of rendered goose fat and rose petals. You swear by not standing downwind of him. Grooming isn't just personal, it's political. A well-maintained appearance suggests order, piety, and self-control. Monks clip their tonsures, knights braid their beards, and noble women pluck their hairlines to appear more refined. Yes, you heard that right. Foreheads were trendy. A high forehead was a beauty ideal, so women literally removed hair to achieve it. You try that once and spend the next week with a red, bumpy hairline and a vague sense of regret. Children, meanwhile, are rarely groomed unless they're royalty. You watch as your neighbor's toddler waddles past in a tunic 3 sizes too big, sticky with something vaguely egg-like, and a full nest of lice happily colonizing his curls. No one blinks. Childhood is basically a waiting room for better hygiene. Even monasteries aren't immune. Monks often shave their heads into a tonsure, leaving that distinctive bald circle surrounded by a fringe. It's a symbol of humility, but also a pretty decent way to discourage lice infestations, fewer hiding places. They also had scheduled ablutions, times of washing, which included feet, hands, and faces, sometimes under strict supervision. Still, one monk's diary laments his constant itching about the nape, which is the most medieval way to say lice are ruining my life. You finish your morning grooming session with a sigh. Your scalp still tingles, and there's probably more to do, but you've picked, combed, squished, and aired out. That's a win. You slap on your hat, part warmth, part camouflage, and head outside a little cleaner, marginally less infested, and with just enough pride to greet the day. But you know you'll be back tomorrow, comb in hand, ready for round 2. The lice always come back. They always do. You trudge into town for market day, your boots squelching through the sludge that lines the main road. It hasn't rained in 3 days, and yet the ground is suspiciously moist. That's medieval city life for you. Hygiene isn't just a personal struggle, it's a community collaboration in filth. As you're around the corner, the stench hits first. It's a confusing medley of rotting vegetables, unwashed bodies, horse dung, and something meaty that might once have been a pig but now resembles an old boot marinated in despair. Welcome to the open market, where sanitation is a suggestion, not a standard. The streets here are narrow, cobbled in the lucky parts, dirt in most, and usually doubling as a drainage system. And by drainage, we mean people casually toss slop and waste out their front windows. A shout of Gardaloop, or something equally indecipherable, depending on where you are, is your only warning before someone upstairs lets loose a bucket of something vile. You hug the walls, fewer splash zones there. Historians still argue whether towns had structured waste management, or if it was more of a chuck and pray situation. Some cities tried. In London, for example, there were actual street cleaning ordinances as early as the 14th century. But enforcing those laws, let's just say there weren't many sanitation officers with clipboards checking dung pile compliance. You pass a dung heap so casually placed that a chicken is using it as a throne. Waste, both human and animal, is everywhere. Horses drop freely as they clop by. Dogs root through scraps. And rats? Oh, they're thriving. Medieval cities were like 5-star resorts for rats. Food scraps, straw bedding, and zero competition from pest control meant they lived their best, plague-spreading lives. Speaking of which, outhouses are a luxury. Most homes rely on chamber pots, which are ceramic bowls used for, well, everything. If you're lucky, yours has a lid. And if you're really lucky, someone in your household is brave enough to dump it outside after sunrise. The designated dumping spots vary. Some people fling it into the street, others save it for the communal waste trench behind the neighborhood. Either way, it's a smell that sticks with you. Literally, in your nose hairs. In wealthier homes or monasteries, you might find actual latrines. Sometimes these are indoor, tucked into the corner of a stone wall with a vertical chute that drops down to a cesspit. Some were even built over rivers, nature's flush button. Except that downstream, someone else is collecting water to cook dinner. Here's public latrines did exist in some towns, often near markets or bridges. These were shared spaces. No dividers, no privacy, just long stone benches with holes and a whole lot of awkward eye contact. And hand washing after. Optional. Soap is expensive, and water isn't always nearby. A quick wipe on your tunic, and you're good to go. Let's talk about the fringe hygiene efforts, like the gong farmers. That's what they were called, gong farmers. Their job? To empty out cesspits and latrines, often under cover of night to spare the town their delightful aroma. They were paid surprisingly well, considering they waded through human waste in leather aprons and knee-high boots, using long-handled scoops to dig out what most people would rather never think about again. You might envy their coin, but not their dinner breaks. City authorities sometimes ordered waste to be carted outside the walls, but timing, enforcement, and the simple fact that carts break down in muck meant piles of refuse could linger for weeks. Imagine living next to a compost heap that doesn't know it's a compost heap. Now imagine it's summer. Some households tried to improve their lot by lining streets with floor rushes or hay to soak up the mess. Noble homes might even have decorative straw infused with dried herbs, lavender, thyme, or mint to offset the ever-present ode to livestock. Of course, that only works until the herbs get wet. Then everything just smells like soggy regret. You walk past a baker's shop and your stomach grumbles. The bread smells divine, yeasty warm, with just a hint of smoke. But remember, cleanliness isn't part of the baking process. The flour was milled in a windmill that doubles as a mouse hotel. The baker's hands? Floury, yes, but also unwashed in sunrise. And there's a rat currently eyeing the display from a beam overhead. You sigh and buy a roll anyway. What's a little extra protein? Water is everywhere and nowhere. Wells exist, but they're communal and frequently contaminated. If you're in a city with an aqueduct, congratulations, you might have access to somewhat fresh water. If not, you either boil what you drink or get used to the taste of iron, frogs, and mystery. Many people opt for ale or weak beer instead. It's safer, mildly alcoholic, and doesn't come with as many intestinal surprises. There were attempts at cleanliness. Some cities employed rakers, essentially early sanitation workers, who would sweep the streets and shovel refuse into carts. But they couldn't keep up. The population grew faster than the policies. It's like trying to mop up the sea with a dishcloth. Then there's the pest issue. Besides rats, fleas are everywhere. Dogs have them. So do cats, sheep, people, and probably that mysterious meat you just bought. Some medieval homes kept ferrets or weasels specifically to hunt vermin. There's even a questionable report of someone trying to train a badger. It didn't go well. Despite it all, there's a rhythm to city life. People accept the grime the same way they accept bad weather. It's just part of the day. You dodge puddles, sidestep manure, and wave to a neighbor who's happily scrubbing a bucket in the middle of the street. She's washing yesterday's stew pot in the same stream someone bathed in this morning. It's all connected, you think. Terrifyingly so. As you return home, you spot a new pile of waste outside your door. Fresh. Probably the butcher's apprentice again. You sigh, grab a wooden scoop, and begin shoveling. It's not glamorous. But in a city where every step is a gamble, and every breeze carries secrets you don't want to sniff, the real miracle is that anyone survives long enough to complain about it. At least you can say this, you'll never take modern plumbing for granted again. You wake up with a start. Not because of a nightmare, but because the bell in the town square is ringing again. Someone's died. That's 3 this week. No one seems particularly surprised. Illness, after all, is as common as muddy boots. You stretch, scratch your scalp, the lice are definitely back, and sniff. Yep. Someone down the street is boiling onions and sage again, likely a last-ditch cure for whatever's got their cousin bedridden. Medieval medicine is part science, part magic, and part enthusiastic guesswork. You step outside into a world where every sniffle might be divine punishment or bad air, And every cure sounds suspiciously like a cooking recipe gone wrong. But this is your reality, a place where people treat headaches with rosemary steam, cure fevers with cold lettuce, and yes, use ground-up unicorn horn if they can afford it. Doctors, if you can find one, are usually trained in Latin, not symptoms. They've studied the greats, Hippocrates, Galen, Avicenna. The core belief? The four humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, must remain balanced. Feeling sluggish? Too much phlegm. Angry and rash covered? That's your yellow bile acting out again. Treatments involve either expelling the excess humor or appeasing it with food, herbs, or something delightfully medieval like leech therapy. Ah yes, the leeches. You've seen them used before. A man down the road had his toe swell up, and rather than rest or elevate, the healer attached 6 shiny black leeches to suck out the bad blood. It worked, kind of. His swelling went down. Then he fainted. Then he lost the toe. You suspect it might have healed better with a clean cloth and rest, but that's not how things are done here. You wander to the apothecary's shop, drawn by the mix of smells, earthy, sharp, medicinal. The shelves are lined with labeled pots, dried herbs tied in bundles, and strange objects in murky jars. Dried bat wings, snake skins, powdered beetles. Things that wouldn't look out of place in a modern fantasy novel, but here, totally normal. Need to cure a cough? Licorice root and honey. Need to stop your neighbor from giving you the evil eye? Dried wolf tongue, just sprinkle it under their doorstep. Some ingredients are just weird enough to feel magical. Mummy powder was a real hit for a while. Yes, actual powdered human remains from Egyptian mummies, ground up and sold as a cure-all. Historians still argue whether people believed in its spiritual power or just thought ancient bodies had some medicinal edge. Either way, you're glad it's out of stock today. Quackery is common. There's always someone selling miracle potions in the square, a bottle promising to cure dropsy, warts, melancholy, and bad luck. Usually it smells like vinegar and turns your tongue green. Still, desperate people pay. Because when your child has a fever and a local barber surgeon recommends bloodletting, even the dubious sparkle of a glowing tonic feels worth trying. Barber surgeons are the multitaskers of medieval medicine. They cut hair, pull teeth, lance boils, and amputate limbs, all in the same afternoon. You once saw one extract a rotten molar from a shouting baker with nothing but a pair of iron tongs and a stiff drink. It worked, technically, though the yelling lasted far longer than the extraction. Surgery is a last resort. Anesthetics are rare and mostly herbal, poppy, mandrake, henbane, used in dangerous doses that might knock you out or knock you out permanently. Wound care involves wine for cleaning, cobwebs for clotting, and prayers for everything else. Infection is a grim reality. You've heard of laudable pus, the type of discharge considered a sign of healing. Any other color or smell? Get your affairs in order. Plagues and epidemics. Let's not even pretend they're unusual. You've lived through a few bad outbreaks, one so harsh people carried sweet-smelling posies under their noses just to block out the scent of mass graves. Scholars debate whether medieval people truly understood contagion, but they certainly knew when something was going around. Towns would shut their gates, and red XS were painted on doors. You remember avoiding certain streets for weeks, the silence broken only by distant coughing and monks chanting prayers for the dying. Sometimes the sick are isolated in leper houses or pest houses, makeshift hospitals where the air smells like fear and herbs. Care is usually offered by monks or nuns who treat wounds, offer food, and pray, often becoming victims themselves. Their devotion is both noble and terrifying. You once watched a young nun sit beside a dying old woman all night, whispering psalms. She didn't even flinch when the woman passed mid-prayer, just closed her eyes, kissed her forehead, and moved on to the next bed. Preventative medicine is creative. People hang charms to ward off disease, drink tinctures at full moon, or avoid sleeping with their feet pointing toward open windows. You carry a pouch with herbs, a tiny cross, and a polished stone you were told protects against fevers. It's all part belief, part ritual, part desperate hope. Public health, such as it is, involves occasional bathhouse closures during outbreaks, or fumigation of homes with burning rosemary and juniper. The idea is to cleanse the bad air, miasma, believed to cause illness. You've sat in such smoke, eyes watering, while your aunt waved a feather fan and muttered prayers. It didn't help the cough, but it did make your clothes smell lovely. There's a certain logic to all of it. No one truly understands bacteria or viruses, but people observe patterns. They know the sick often live near waste, that stagnant water causes trouble, that fresh air and clean linens, as rare as they are, seem to help. And so, slowly, painfully, they build their own kind of medicine, part empirical, part inherited, and entirely shaped by what they have on hand. You step out of the apothecary with a tiny bundle of dried thyme and instructions to boil it into tea. It's for your cousin's cough, though deep down you doubt it'll do much. Still, it's better than nothing. And it smells nice. Back home, you place the herbs in the pot and light the fire. You listen to the bubbling water and the crackle of wood and wonder, just briefly, how people in the future will look back on all this. Will they laugh? Shudder? Be grateful? Probably all three. But for now, you sip your thyme tea, press a warm cloth to your forehead. Try not to think about the fact that your tooth has started to ache. You're not even out of bed yet, and you already smell smoke, fish, and something sour, probably the vinegar the neighbor uses to mop her floors or her child. Either way, the medieval home isn't exactly a spa. Still, you roll out from your wool-stuffed mattress, give your feet a quick shake for stray fleas, and begin your morning routine. Or what passes for one. Your house is small, just a single room if you're lucky, maybe two if you're extremely lucky and moderately wealthy. Floors are usually beaten earth, occasionally strewn with straw or rushes, which are meant to soak up spills and smells. Too bad they also soak up everything else: grease, urine, spilled ale, bits of food, and sometimes things you can't quite identify but definitely move. You start with your face. There's a cracked basin near the hearth, filled with water that was boiled last night to chase off the chill. It's cold now, of course. You splash some on your face. Try not to think about how many days it's been reused. Soap? If you've got it, it's lye-based, smells vaguely like goat, and leaves your skin feeling both raw and oddly greasy. But hey, cleanish is clean enough. Then comes your mouth. Brushing your teeth isn't really a thing, but people do chew on twigs, rub their gums with salt or sage, or rinse with wine. You opt for mint leaves this morning, mostly because your cousin chewed the last toothbrush stick into splinters. Toothpaste doesn't exist, and dentists are more likely to pull than polish, so you're hoping the mint staves off both decay and public shame. Your clothes, probably the same ones as yesterday and the day before. Get a quick shake. You brush off crumbs, beetle or two, and smooth the wool tunic over your body. Linen undergarments, if you have them, are precious. Many people sleep in their clothes. Laundry is hard work. Hauling water, boiling it, scrubbing with ashes or harsh soaps, and then wringing everything out by hand. Most garments only see a good wash once a season, if that. Historians still argue whether medieval folks changed clothes weekly or monthly. Some texts suggest that wealthier people kept multiple outfits and laundered more frequently. But for the average peasant, changing your shirt might happen when the seams give out, not before. You tug on your shoes, clunky leather things with thin soles and no left or right distinction, and step outside. A neighbor is already dumping a pot of kitchen waste into the communal ditch. She nods, lifts her hem, and steps over a chicken with all the grace of someone who's done this dance 1,000 times. She probably has. Time to wash your hands. There's a rain barrel near the house, its water slick with floating leaves and the occasional mosquito. Still, it's better than nothing. You plunge your hands in and scrub with a bit of sand to dislodge whatever yesterday left behind. Soap's too precious for regular use. Instead, texture and friction do most of the work. And now for hair. Your head itches again. Lice are a constant companion. You tried combing with a fine-toothed bone comb, dousing with vinegar, even rubbing crushed herbs like rosemary or pennyroyal into your scalp. Nothing really works. You just get used to it. Fleas, lice, and mites all thrive in a world where warm bodies and woolen clothes are the perfect habitat. Bathing is a curious affair. Contrary to myth, medieval people did bathe, just not daily. If you're lucky enough to live near a bathhouse, you might go weekly. Public bathhouses are social spaces, steamy, busy, and surprisingly co-ed in some towns. You soak, scrub, gossip. You also risk catching lice from the towels, but that's life. At home, bathing is much more involved. Heating enough water to fill a tub, if you even have a tub, takes hours. Most people settle for spot cleaning, face, hands, and armpits if there's time. Full immersion happens on feast days, special occasions, or when something itches badly enough to justify the effort. You recall one especially ambitious bath last year. It involved filling every pot in the house, boiling water in shifts, and dragging the wooden tub into the middle of the room. You added crushed lavender to the water, fancy, and soaked until your fingers pruned. You also didn't do it again for 3 months. Too much hassle. Women, in particular, have to be inventive. Without modern hygiene products, they rely on cloth rags for menstruation, washed and reused. Some women stuff soft wool into linen pockets or use moss as a crude absorbent. Herbal remedies are used to ease cramps or regulate cycles, things like mugwort or raspberry leaf. The church isn't always thrilled about such knowledge being passed around, but women quietly keep their own traditions. In the wealthier homes, hygiene gets a bit of an upgrade. Noble families might own decorative basins and ewers, servants to carry hot water, and herbal soaps imported from abroad. Their bath routines are more elaborate. Heated rooms, perfumed oils, combs made of ivory or horn. Still, they're not bathing daily either. Cleanliness is aspirational, but not habitual. Oddly, the idea of hygiene is more about odor and appearance than germs, since, no one knows germs exist. If you look clean and smell herbal, people assume you're healthy. Hence the obsession with pomanders, scented balls of herbs or wax, hung from belts or tucked in sleeves. They mask your own stench and fend off the bad air thought to cause illness. For some, cleanliness is a sign of virtue. Monks and nuns follow strict washing rituals, tying hygiene to spiritual purity. Monasteries often have running water and rudimentary sewer systems, luxuries the average townsperson can only dream of. You once visited an abbey where they wash their hands before every meal and bathe twice a month. Twice. Absolute decadence. Still, not everyone agrees. Some theologians argue that too much washing is vain, even sinful. After all, why polish the flesh when the soul needs scrubbing? You once overheard a priest scold a woman for excessive bathing, claiming it led to impure thoughts. She responded by dumping a bucket of water over his head. Iconic. Your own approach. Wash when you can, pretend the rest of the time. You dab behind your ears with a damp cloth, chew a fennel seed to freshen your breath, and rub crushed rosemary into your hair to mask whatever's living there. There's something oddly comforting about it all. The daily grind becomes a rhythm. You learn to live with imperfection, to take joy in the little victories, like clean fingernails. or a shirt that doesn't smell like fermented goat. And when someone does show up freshly washed and perfumed, you notice. So does everyone else. You're not spotless. You're not sterile. But in your world, that's not the goal. Clean enough to be presentable, fragrant enough to be bearable, and healthy enough to keep walking. That's the sweet spot. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. You're crouched over a wooden bench with a dull blade in one hand and a goose feather in the other. A pile of stringy, feather-covered chicken parts lies nearby. And honestly, you're not sure if you're preparing dinner or helping your cousin with some ritualized poultry dissection. Either way, it smells like old meat and wood smoke, standard fare in a medieval kitchen. Food in your world isn't just about taste. It's about survival, status, and whatever's still edible. Forget your modern cravings for tacos or Thai. Tonight, if you're lucky, you'll be eating pottage, a slow-cooked stew of grains, beans, and whatever vegetables or scraps you can scrounge. It's warm, filling, and tastes mostly like onions and hope. Meals in medieval Europe are deeply influenced by class. If you're poor, and you probably are, your diet is built on bread, porridge, and hard-won garden vegetables. Meat? Rare. Cheese? A luxury. Eggs? Only if your hen cooperates and the neighbor doesn't get to them first. You might supplement with forage things. Wild herbs, nuts, berries, maybe a fish if you live near water, and have a net that isn't full of holes. But if you're part of the noble elite, congratulations, you eat better than 90% of the population. Your meals include roast meats, pies, imported spices, and wine that doesn't taste like foot. You sit at long tables covered with linen, attended by servants who carve meat and refill cups before you even notice they're empty. And don't forget the spices: pepper, cinnamon, saffron, cloves, all shipped at outrageous cost to make your beef tongue taste like exotic paradise. Still, across all classes, meals are guided by strict rules. Not just etiquette, but moral and medical codes. Certain foods are hot or cold, moist or dry, based on humoral theory. Bread is nourishing and balances the humors, while raw fruits are suspect. Too cold, too moist, too risky. Historians still argue whether this system genuinely guided eating habits, or just offered a good excuse to avoid suspicious-looking turnips. Speaking of bread, it's the medieval MVP. You eat it at every meal, in every form, from coarse, dark loaves in the village to fluffy white manchet reserved for nobility. Some loaves are so dense they double as weapons or doorstops. Others serve as trenchers, thick slabs of bread used as plates. After the meal, the sauce-soaked trencher is either eaten or given to the poor. If you're lucky enough to be the poor, that's dinner. Hunger is always lurking. A bad harvest means famine. A spoiled shipment of grain means no bread. You remember the winter 2 years ago when your family boiled grass and bark into soup. It didn't work. Everyone got sick. You still dream about that taste. Bitter, earthy, and full of dread. There's a reason people preserve food like their lives depend on it, because they do. Salting, drying, smoking, pickling, all essential skills. You've spent entire days helping to gut fish, hang herds upside down, and bury turnips in straw-lined pits for safekeeping. Butter is stored in crocks. Apples are wrapped in hay. Meat is salted until it tastes like a medieval chew toy. But not everything is grim. There's joy in seasonal abundance. Spring means fresh greens, sorrel, nettles, leeks. Summer brings cherries, peas, and eels. Autumn is glorious. Apples, nuts, cabbages, and if the gods are kind, a pig slaughter. Winter is cabbage again. Lots of cabbage. And dried peas. You learn to be creative. On feast days, the table transforms. You've attended a wedding once where the main dish was a boar's head, complete with tusks, and an apple jammed in its mouth. People clapped. Someone recited poetry. There were sweet tarts filled with minced meat and raisins, and pies so thick with lard you could skate across them. You left with grease on your chin and joy in your belly. Of course, medieval kitchens are their own kind of chaos. No electric stoves or timers here. Just open flames, soot, and constant vigilance. You've burned your fingers more times than you can count. Pots are suspended over hearths or buried in coals. Cooking takes all day. Baking is done in communal ovens if you're in a village, or private ones if you live in a manor. Either way, it's hot, smoky, and someone is always shouting. Cleanliness is optional. You rinse utensils in water that's been used 3 times, sweat flies off the cutting board, and hope no rats fall into the flour sack again. They will. Eventually. It's a constant battle between keeping things edible and avoiding whatever gave your uncle food poisoning last spring. Drinks are just as essential as food, and often safer than water. Ale is the beverage of choice for most, including children. It's weak, but boiled during brewing, which kills off some nastiness. Wine is more common in the South, cider where apples grow, and mead if someone's feeling fancy. Water? Only if it comes from a clean spring. Otherwise, it's full of who knows what. You once saw a man drink from a stream behind the tannery. He died 2 days later. Cause of death? Likely regret. In wealthier circles, food is as much performance as sustenance. Colorful dishes, layered pies, meat molded into mythical creatures. There are even manuscripts describing how to make roasted swan vomit fire using flammable alcohol and a hidden pipe. Historians still argue whether these recipes were widely used or just showy one-offs for royal banquets. For you, the day's meals are simpler but still require effort. You gather vegetables from the garden, leeks, carrots, and a misshapen parsnip. You mix barley into the pot with a dried ham bone you've been saving. The stew simmers all afternoon. You throw in a fistful of sage and thyme to mask the slightly off smell. It works, mostly. By evening, the household gathers. You eat from a shared bowl with wooden spoons. Everyone gets a hunk of bread, and your cousin steals your turnip. You don't fight her. You're too tired. You just sip your ale and savor the warmth of the stew. It's salty, smoky, and honestly not bad. Could use garlic, but those cloves are for your aunt's toothache. After the meal, you scrape the bowls clean, toss the scraps to the chickens, and roll your eyes when your uncle complains about the lack of meat. You remind him the butcher's shop had nothing but tripe today. He pretends he didn't hear you. You fall asleep later with a full belly and a bit of stew crust under your fingernails. Not ideal. But in a world where famine is always a bad harvest away, you count it as a win. You dream of pies filled with honeyed almonds and roasted pears. In the dream, your trenchers are made of cake. You wake to the sound of bells, distant, hollow, echoing over rooftops and chicken coops. That's your cue. Whether they're ringing for matins, market, or some poor soul's funeral, the day has officially begun. You stretch, scratch, and shuffle outside because today, it's your turn to empty the chamber pot. Again, let's talk sanitation, or more accurately, the creative ways your world tries to stay clean while mostly failing. Toilets, as you know them, don't exist. There are no sparkling porcelain thrones, no endless flushes, no little paper-wrapped rolls in a basket. Instead, there's the humble chamber pot, a ceramic bowl that sits under the bed, waiting patiently to be filled overnight with everything your body no longer wants. You carry the pot to the alley and tip its contents into the street gutter or cesspit. The smell hits you first, sharp, sour, familiar. You look both ways before dumping. It's polite, at least, not to hit anyone. And though it's technically illegal in some towns to toss waste from upper windows without shouting, "Gardes low," a French warning meaning, "Watch out for the water," Enforcement is, let's say, casual. The streets are often paved in waste and mud, churned together by hooves, wheels, and desperate feet. Pigs, chickens, dogs, even humans relieve themselves wherever they please. You avoid stepping in puddles unless you absolutely have to. The distinction between water and waste is murky at best. Still, it's not all chaos. Some towns have public latrines, communal toilets overhanging rivers or ditches, where everyone just lines up and hopes the wind is blowing the right way. Monasteries fare better, with rudimentary sewer systems that use gravity and running water to flush waste away. You once visited a priory where the latrine emptied into a channel running beneath the walls. It was almost elegant. Almost. Of course, for most people, going to the bathroom is a matter of convenience and geography. Fields are fair game. So are forest edges, roadside ditches, or the back corner of your own yard. The real challenge is privacy. You learn to look casual while squatting. Everyone's done it. No one talks about it. Unless, of course, someone slips in it. Then it's the neighborhood's joke for a week. In castles and manors, the nobility enjoy the luxury of garderobes, stone cubbies built into walls, often with wooden seats and a vertical shaft that drops straight down. The contents either land in a pit or run off into a moat. Historians still argue whether the word garderobe referred originally to a place for clothing or a toilet, since clothes were often hung inside to deter moths with the rising ammonia. Clever and mildly horrifying. You've heard tales of night soil collectors in big towns, people who make a living emptying cesspits and selling the waste as fertilizer. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. They're sometimes called gong farmers, and their job involves lowering themselves into pits with buckets and hauling out the worst of humanity. It pays well. It has to. Washing your hands afterward is optional, but smart. There's a bucket of rainwater by the door and some ashes for scrubbing. Soap is too precious. You make do. You've learned to scrub under your nails with a sliver of reed, a trick your grandmother taught you. She also taught you not to touch your face until after washing. Solid advice in any century. Toothbrushes? Not quite. But toothpicks are common, made of bone, wood, or metal. Some people even carry them on a chain around their neck like fancy dental jewelry. Mouthwash? Try wine, vinegar, or herbal infusions. The bravest among you chew on mint, fennel, or the occasional clove if you're feeling royal. Public health as a concept is a bit wobbly. Towns do try, in their way. Some have laws requiring households to sweep the street in front of their homes. There are fines for throwing animal carcasses into the river. A few cities even employ street cleaners, though mostly for appearances during festivals. Still, every effort helps. There are bathhouses too, though their reputation depends on where you live. Some are respectable, run by local women who know their herbs. Others are thinly veiled brothels, and you learn quickly which ones are safe for scrub and which ones offer extra services. You once overheard a merchant complain that his bathhouse soap stung worse than a plague. You don't ask. And about that plague, well, let's just say sanitation matters. When disease strikes, people start to panic. The town might burn aromatic herbs in the streets or ban strangers from entering. Bodies are buried quickly, sometimes in mass graves. You remember the fear in the air last time illness swept through. Doors shuttered, shops closed, silence broken only by the sound of the death cart wheels. People wear pomanders, little balls of herbs and flowers, to ward off bad smells, believed to carry disease. Physicians don bird-like masks filled with fragrant herbs and vinegar-soaked cloth. It's unsettling, but it's what they have. And to be fair, some towns do manage to keep relatively clean quarters. It's all a matter of wealth, leadership, and dumb luck. You do your part. You try not to dump waste too close to the well. You keep your chamber or pot cleanish. You line the privy pit with straw and pray it doesn't overflow. You toss your washing water away from the house and keep a few sprigs of lavender on the window ledge, not just for the smell, but for the hope that it keeps the bad humors out. Even so, you can't escape the stink entirely. It's woven into the world. You learn to live with it, to recognize the good smells, fresh bread, soap root, clean hay, and to avoid the bad. When someone walks past smelling of rosemary and rainwater, notice. It's like perfume and status in one. And as you squat behind the stable one chilly morning, knees popping, you wonder if the future might bring better options. Indoor plumbing, maybe? Toilet paper that isn't a handful of moss? Button you can press to whisk everything away? But that's centuries off. For now, you clean up, wash your hands with sand and prayer, and carry on. You lean over a bucket of gray, lukewarm water, trying to decide if washing your shirt for the third time this month is truly worth it. Spoiler, it probably isn't. But the mud stains on the hem are starting to resemble a map of your entire village. And your mother made a face this morning that said, "Fix this or sleep outside." So, laundry it is. In your medieval world, cleanliness is relative. It's not that people don't want to be clean. It's that the resources, time, and expectations are wildly different from what you know today. Soap is homemade, laborious, and often stings. Water has to be fetched from a stream or well, heated if you're lucky, and reused until it's basically stew. And clothing. It's not casually tossed in a basket at the end of the day. It's precious, limited, and worn repeatedly until absolutely necessary to wash. You scrub with lye soap, a rough caustic slab that burns slightly if you have a cut. It's made from ashes and animal fat, boiled down in an iron pot, and poured into molds. Your family makes it twice a year and guards it like treasure. You use only enough to bubble up some foam, then start scrubbing the fabric against itself, or a ribbed washing board if you've got one. No fancy detergents, no fragrant softeners, just friction and faith. Your clothes, like most people's, are made of wool or linen, both durable, both temperamental. Wool has to be handled gently or it'll shrink into child-sized rags. Linen, on the other hand, can take a beating. You beat it with wooden paddles, bash it against rocks, or stomp it in a tub with your feet like a grape harvest gone wrong. Washing days are community days. You gather by the stream or the washing pool, and while your hands go numb in cold water, you trade gossip, recipes, and the occasional insult. Someone always ends up with soaked boots. Someone else always loses a sock to the current. You've personally chased more than one piece of undergarment downstream, swearing and splashing all the way. Drying is a game of chance. If it's sunny, you drape everything over bushes or ropes and hope no passing bird gets any ideas. If it's raining, which it often is, you hang things indoors and pray the fire does its job. Wet clothes smell like damp dogs and despair, but still better than the alternative, mildew and mold that spreads faster than church gossip. Bathing your body is an even bigger production. There's no daily shower. No 5-minute rinse and repeat. Bathing is a special event, often tied to feast days, marriages, or suspicious rashes. You fetch water in buckets, heat it over the hearth, and fill a wooden tub. It takes over an hour. And then you get in, hopefully before the water cools, and definitely before your siblings do. If you're from a wealthier household, the bathing setup is more elegant. Think portable wooden tubs lined with cloth, fragrant herbs floating on the surface, and attendants pouring warm water over your shoulders. If you're in a city, you might visit a public bathhouse, where a fee buys you access to tubs, steam rooms, and sometimes even massages. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, some bathhouses come with other services. You learn which ones are trustworthy, or just bring a friend for backup. Soap for the body is a gentler version of the laundry kind, made with olive oil or herbs. Scented varieties exist: rosewater, lavender, bay leaf, but they're for the upper crust. You, meanwhile, make do with nettles and mint. It stings a little, but you feel clean afterward, almost holy. Hair washing is rare and risky. With no conditioner, your hair turns into straw if you wash too often. Most people brush their hair out daily with bone or wooden combs and use oil to keep it manageable. Head coverings help too: linen caps for women, felt hats or hoods for men. They keep your hair protected, covered, and out of the soup. And speaking of heads lice, let's not pretend. They're everywhere. You comb, you pick, you mutter curses in Latin. There are herbal remedies, sure. Rosemary rinses, vinegar washes, sometimes even a light dusting of ashes. But the truth is, if you don't have lice, you probably just got over a case. Or you're in denial. You once knew a woman who shaved her head entirely and wore a wig made of sheep wool. It itched worse than the lice. As for other body odors, well, everyone smells. It's part of life. People mask it with herbs, bundles of dried lavender in clothing chests, sage tucked under belts, rosemary oil behind the ears. Perfume exists in rudimentary forms, made from flowers, alcohol, and resins. Only the wealthy can afford to wear it daily. For you, it's a splash of rosewater from Aunt Elspeth's wedding vial, saved for market days and funerals. Oddly enough, medieval people do have a sense of cleanliness, even if it doesn't match modern standards. Spiritual purity is often tied to physical cleanliness. Bathing is encouraged before holidays or religious observances. Pilgrims wash before visiting relics. And monks, those champions of routine, bathe more regularly than most. In some monasteries, there are even set days for bathing written into the schedule. Historians still argue whether these were always followed or more aspirational. Clothing hygiene also has its rules. Undergarments, like shifts and braids, are worn closest to the skin and washed more often. Outer garments? Rarely. Your cloak may have never seen water. Instead, you brush off dirt, hang it to air, and call it good. You once tried to wash a woolen tunic, and it came out 2 sizes smaller. Lesson learned. And then there's the fringe stuff, remedies, and beauty hacks passed around like medieval TikTok. You've heard of people using crushed snails to soften skin, or bathing in fermented mare's milk to cure rashes. One woman swears by boiling rosemary in wine and splashing it on her feet to stop sweating. You tried it. Your feet smelled like soup. But hey, innovation counts. Clean is what you make of it. And while you may not have a rain shower or triple-ply toilet paper, you've got a bar of soap, a comb, and a friend who'll help you chase your shirt downriver. That's something. At the end of laundry day, your back aches, your fingernails are soft, and your sleeves are still damp. But your tunic smells faintly of lavender and ash. You hang it by the hearth, wrap yourself in your second-best shift, and slide under scratchy wool blankets, freshly scrubbed and only mildly itchy. Tomorrow, you'll probably be muddy again by breakfast. But tonight, you are, by medieval standards, gloriously clean. Your feet crunch over gravel as you make your way toward the town's outer edge, past the tannery, the dung heaps, and the suspiciously soggy spot where no one ever builds anything. You're headed for the well. Not just any well, mind you, but the well, the one your entire quarter relies on for water, gossip, and the occasional cat rescue. Water in your world is life, but also danger, also work, also mysterious. Fetching it is a daily task, usually delegated to someone low on the family totem pole. Today it's you. You carry 2 wooden buckets, their handles worn smooth, their bottoms slightly leaky. The well stands like a weather giant in the middle of the square, its crank groaning with age. You draw the rope up hand over hand, palms chafing until the heavy bucket breaks the surface and splashes into daylight. The water is cool, vaguely metallic, sometimes a little murky. You've seen fish in it. Once a frog. No one mentions that. Everyone just hopes the bottom stays deep, dark, and forgotten. There's a reason you never drink it straight. Water is rarely trusted in your time. The smarter folk boil it. The wealthier ones flavor it with herbs or mix it with wine. Even children know to avoid standing pools and shady streams. Historians still argue whether medieval people fully grasped the concept of waterborne illness, but they definitely noticed that bad water made you sick. You've seen it too. Dysentery, fever, belly cramps so fierce they make grown men weep into their cloaks. So what do you drink instead? Often it's small beer, a very weak low-alcohol ale brewed specifically for daily consumption. Even children drink it. It's just strong enough to kill off most pathogens and just mild enough that you can have 5 mugs without falling into the fire. You've helped brew it before. Water, malt, maybe some herbs, boiled and fermented in big wooden tubs. It's cloudy, warm, and a bit sour, but it's safer than whatever's lurking in the stream behind the butchers. Wine is another option if you're lucky or noble. But most wine is cut with water, sweetened with honey, or spiced into oblivion. Clean water on its own. That's luxury. It exists. Mountain springs, fast-moving brooks, wells deep enough to hit sweet groundwater. But it's rare and prized. If you find a clean source, you protect it like treasure. Bathing water, laundry water, drinking water, it all gets fetched by hand, carried by bucket, and reused until it's murky. Some people get creative. Rain barrels collect runoff from thatched roofs, although there's always the risk of bird surprise. Gray water from washing is used to clean floors or water plants. Nothing goes to waste unless absolutely necessary. In cities, water distribution can be surprisingly advanced. Some places have aqueducts. Yes, really, remnants from the Romans are engineered anew by clever masons. Public fountains flow from central cisterns. You've seen stone lions spitting water into basins, watched by children and the occasional thirsty dog. It looks magical, but you know someone's maintaining those pipes behind the scenes, clearing out moss and rat nests. In bigger towns, there are also water carriers, men and women, who fetch and deliver water for a price. They're strong, fast, and perpetually damp. You once tried to carry 2 full buckets uphill and nearly collapsed by the bakery. The carriers make it look effortless, but their shoulders tell another story. Rope burns, calluses, and an unmistakable lean to the left. Back in your village, though, it's all DIY. Wells are social hubs as much as utility. People gather there with their buckets, their stories, their complaints. You've overheard everything from birth rumors to fish prices while waiting your turn. Occasionally someone drops a coin or a curse down the well. You once saw a child lean over too far and tumble in. Took 3 grown men and a lot of rope to get him out, wet and terrified but mostly unhurt. For weeks afterward, his nickname was Frog. As for toilet water, remember the garderobes? Yeah, no one's drinking downstream from a castle if they can help it. Cesspit seep, chamber pots splash, and moats, once thought decorative or defensive, become open sewers. You pass them and breathe through your sleeve. It helps. A little. Sometimes, water is used in ceremonies, for baptisms, blessings, or cures. Holy water, especially, carries special reverence. It's been prayed over, purified by belief, and sprinkled liberally during everything from weddings to fevers. You've seen people wash their hands in it before meals, as if piety alone could scour away germs. Then there's the fringe crowd, those who swear by mystical springs and healing wells. You've heard stories of waters that can cure blindness or ease childbirth pains. Some are guarded by monks. Others by local legends involving dragons, ghosts, or saints who once lost a sandal there. People make pilgrimages to these sites, drop coins into the water, and leave with bottles sloshing hope. But water can also turn. Floods happen. Wells dry up. Crops wither or drown. Rivers shift course. One summer, your village ran dry for weeks, and you had to walk nearly a mile to fill your pails. That water tasted like old shoes and cow breath, but you drank it anyway. You've also learned to read water. Fast-moving means cleaner. Cold means fresh. If it smells like rot or sulfur, you walk away. If birds won't touch it, you follow their lead. Sometimes you even boil water with rosemary or sage, not just for safety, but to chase the smell away. It helps. Mostly, water isn't just a resource. It's a gamble. Every sip, every bath, every bucket is a choice between risk and necessity. And somehow you make it work. You've adapted, adjusted, and developed an instinct for what's safe or safe enough. So you sling your buckets over your shoulders, feel the slosh against your hips, and make the slow trek home. Your arms ache, your sleeves are wet, and there's probably a mosquito larva in one of the pails. You'll strain it through cloth before using it to boil soup, or wash your face, or make beer. You do what you have to, because clean water, that's the dream. That's the miracle. That's the thing you'll tell your grandchildren about if your arms haven't fallen off from carrying it. The streets squish under your boots again. Remember those? Still slick with last week's market runoff. But tonight, you're not dodging chickens or fish guts. No, tonight you're braving something even more treacherous than alley mud or flying chamber pots. You're off to the barber surgeon. That's right. Not just your friendly neighborhood hair trimmer, though he'll absolutely cut your bangs with something resembling a hoof knife. The barber surgeon in your village is a jack of all gory trades. Part stylist, part dentist, part medic, part amateur butcher with a fondness for leeches. You duck into his hut, which smells sharply of metal, herbs, and faint dread. He greets you cheerfully, wiping his hands on a rag that might have once been white. Tools hang from the walls, blades, saws, pincers, shears, all arranged like a particularly aggressive still life. You've come for a simple haircut, but let's be honest, this man is ready to amputate a foot at a moment's notice. In the medieval world, cleanliness and healthcare go hand in blood-stained hand. People understand that filth often leads to illness, even if they don't quite grasp why. The barber surgeon operates at this messy intersection. He shaves heads to reduce lice, trims beards to keep fleas at bay, and sometimes even applies poultices for minor wounds. His shop is a hub of hygiene, such as it is. He also pulls teeth, often, with tongs. No anesthetic, unless you count a swig of ale and a stick to bite down on. You once watched a man get 2 molars yanked in one sitting. He didn't scream exactly, he just made a sort of wail noise and passed out. They gave him a turnip to chew once he came to. Barber surgeons also bleed people. Yes, the infamous bloodletting. It's thought to balance the humors, the mysterious bodily fluids believed to control everything from mood to digestion. Too much black bile. You're gloomy. Too much blood? You're feverish. The solution? Open a vein and let it drip. You've had it done twice. Once it helped. Once it made you faint into a basket of onions. The barber ties a cloth around your arm, nicks a vein with an absurdly large blade, and catches the blood in a shallow bowl. He watches carefully, mutters something about full moon fevers, and hands you a mug of beer when he's done. You feel lightheaded, slightly heroic, and deeply suspicious of your own veins. Still, this is your best option. Real physicians are rare, expensive, and often off in castles diagnosing nobles with too much melancholy. And monks? They're helpful, sure. Many monasteries serve as informal hospitals. The monks grow herbs, write down remedies, and administer care based on a blend of scripture and salves. But unless you live near one, you're stuck with good old Bartholomew and his scissors of doom. That's not to say healing is all blood and bone sauce. There's also a long tradition of folk medicine. Your grandmother, for example, swears by onion poultices for chest colds and honey for wounds. She once wrapped your sprained ankle in cabbage leaves and whispered a charm over it. And to be fair, it did stop hurting 2 days later. Historians still argue whether this was the cabbage, the charm, or just time. You've chewed willow bark for headaches. Spoiler, it's a natural source of salicylic acid, the stuff in aspirin. You've rubbed garlic on a rash. You've drank herbal teas so bitter they made your ears twitch. Your favorite, a balm made of lavender, mint, and lard that your aunt applies behind the ears. It smells like someone's garden exploded, but you sleep like a rock afterward. Then there are the more creative remedies. One man claims he was cured of boils by standing naked in a field at dawn and reciting a psalm backward. Another woman rubs mouse fat on her temples for migraines. You once tried a detox where you had to eat nothing but leeks and barley for 3 days. It mostly gave you gas. Cleanliness is part of this healing culture, though interpreted loosely. Washing wounds is encouraged if water is available. Boiling tools, that's a monk thing. Most barber surgeons just wipe them off on their aprons. You've seen surgical instruments dried in the sun and dusted with herbs to ward off rot. Does it work? Sometimes. Other times, people just lose a few fingers. Hospitals do exist in your world, especially in large cities. But they aren't what you're imagining. These are more like religious hostels, places to rest, pray, and maybe get a bandage or two. The sick are separated by illness when possible. Food is basic. Beds are straw. But there's comfort, quiet, and someone to hold your hand while you mutter your final prayers. And yes, you have to donate a goat if you recover. Clean bandages are valuable. Linen strips are washed, boiled if you're lucky, and reused until they fray. Honey is slathered on wounds to prevent infection. It works too. You've seen it draw out pus like magic. Wine is poured on cuts, both to clean and to distract you from the pain. Your cousin swears by it. You prefer not to get injured at all. Quarantine is a thing, especially during outbreaks. The village once locked down for 2 weeks when a peddler brought the swelling sickness. Doors were marked with crosses. Food was left at thresholds. You stayed inside and tried not to cough. It passed, eventually. But your little brother still shouts unclean whenever he sneezes. Plague is the nightmare, of course. You've heard stories of whole towns emptied in a week, of carts rolling through the streets, of priests too scared to offer last rites. Cleanliness becomes almost sacred during such times. Fires are lit to purify the air. Herbs are stuffed in masks, in clothing, in nostrils. People burn their clothes, shave their heads, and pray like their lives depend on it, because they do. And through all this, you cope. You clean what you can. You trust the herbs, the hands, the whispers passed down through generations. You scrub cuts with salt water. You boil your comb. You avoid the river after sheep have crossed it. Healthcare in your time is rough, experimental, and occasionally superstitious, but not hopeless. There's care here. There's effort. People want to be clean, to be whole, to survive. And sometimes, despite the odds and the leeches, they do. As you leave the barber surgeon's hut with your hair uneven but your blood pressure is somewhat stable, you breathe in the cool night air. You're bruised, bandaged, and covered in herbal ointment that smells suspiciously like roasted turkey. But you're upright. You're healing. You're cleanish. Which, frankly, is a victory. You wake to the sharp crack of dawn filtering through the wooden shutters, the faint must of old straw in your bedding, and something scratching at the rafters, probably another squirrel. Today is laundry day. And before you get too excited, let's clarify. This isn't a cheerful montage of soap bubbles, humming tunes, and tumble-dry towels. This is medieval laundry, which means it's grueling and frequent and smells like someone boiled a swamp. You crawl out of bed and gather the family's pile. It's not large. Most people in your world have just a few garments, maybe a tunic and an undertunic, a pair of hose, a shift, a cloak for the chill. Linen closest to the skin gets dirty fastest, so it's the thing washed most often. Your wool outer layers, those are brushed, aired out, and worn until they basically walk off on their own. You try not to think about it. You carry the laundry bundle, already damp with morning dew, toward the river. It's the same stream where fish are caught, horses are watered, and people sometimes bathe. Clean, right? You find your spot along the bank, where flat stones serve as impromptu washboards. Your neighbors are already there, slapping garments against rocks with a rhythm that sounds vaguely threatening. You know it. Laundry is serious business. First, you soak the linens in cold water. Then you scrub them with ash lye, a caustic solution made by pouring water through wood ashes. It's harsh on fabric and harsher on skin, but it cuts through sweat and grease better than plain water ever could. Your hands sting. Your knuckles go red. You press on. Historians still argue whether medieval people fully understood germ theory. They didn't. But they absolutely noticed that soaking things in lye or boiling them made them smell better and probably stopped people from dying quite so often. You've seen older women stir laundry in cauldrons, letting steam rise until the clothes soften and pale. You've tried it once. Almost fell in. You wring the fabric out by hand. No wringer machines here. Just you, your grip, and the upper body strength of a blacksmith. Then the drying. Clothes are draped on bushes, hung over lines, or laid flat on warm stones. You use whatever sun and breeze you can catch. And let's be honest, if a dog doesn't pee on them, it's a successful drying session. There's a social side to this ordeal. Wash day is gossip day. While your hands are raw and your back is screaming, your mouth is free to work overtime. You hear about who's pregnant, who's been seen sneaking into the tavern at odd hours, and whether or not the baker is using sawdust in his flour again. It's practically a town meeting with bonus blisters. Laundry soap, when it exists, is homemade, animal fat mixed with lye and sometimes herbs. It's more paste than bar, more smell coverer than scent adder. You've smelled lavender soap exactly once, a noble's manner. It was shaped like a rose and felt like touching a cloud. You were not allowed to take it. You tried. For tough stains, there are special tricks. Urine, yes, urine, is sometimes used to pre-treat stubborn spots. It's called chamber lye, and you'll never unknow that. You've helped collect it before, from your own household and others. Nothing bonds a community like passing a sloshing pot of pee down the street. It works, though. Clothes come out whiter. If you don't breathe too deeply, you barely notice. Colorful garments get extra care. Dyed fabric is expensive and prone to fading, so they're washed less often, turned inside out and dried in shade. You once ruined your best green tunic by hanging it too long in the sun. It turned a shade you called pale despair. You wear it anyway. And wool? Wool is special. It's water resistant, insulating even when wet, and nearly indestructible, but it shrinks like a scandal when washed wrong. So it's rarely submerged. Instead, you beat it, brush it, and hang it in fresh air to lose its funk. If it starts sprouting mold, you hang it near a fire and mutter unkind things until it behaves. Then there are the undergarments, the humble linen shifts and brays that catch the worst of bodily grime. These are the true MVPs of medieval hygiene. Washed more frequently than outerwear, They serve as the first, and sometimes only, line of defense between skin and filth. You've patched yours so many times it's more thread than fabric. But for all this work, no one expects perfect cleanliness. Stains are part of life. Smells, too. If someone reeks, they might get a comment or a look, but only if it's truly offensive. Most people carry the scent of work, sweat, smoke, livestock, maybe a bit of onion. You notice it less the more you live with it. You once met a traveling minstrel who wore perfume, actual perfume, and you couldn't decide whether he was magical or just suspicious. Back at home, you hang the last shirt by the hearth to finish drying. Your hands are wrinkled, your arms sore, your skirt wet to the knees. You feel like you've been kneading dough for a dozen invisible loaves. But there's a strange satisfaction in it. Clothes that no longer crunch when folded, sleeves that smell mostly of river and lye instead of goat. Sometimes, you sprinkle dried rosemary or lavender into chests to keep things fresh. Mice hate it, and so do lice. You also beat blankets and cloaks outdoors to clear out dust and bugs. Spring cleaning? That's just every third Tuesday in your world. There are fringe theories, 2 old wives' tales about washing clothes under a waxing moon, or avoiding laundry during eclipses because it might sour the fabric. You followed some of them, mostly because they're fun and involve less work. Do they help? Historians still argue. In colder seasons, wash days are rare. Water freezes. Fingers go numb. Clothes take forever to dry, and sometimes freeze solid on the line. Winter laundry is done only when absolutely necessary. You wear more layers, turn garments inside out, and pray for a thaw. Once, you buried your shift in snow to bleach it. It came out looking exactly the same, but colder. Still, you make it work. There's dignity in it, and the scrub and slap and rinse of it all. A cleanish tunic, a smoke-scented cloak, and a pair of socks that don't crunch when you walk. That's the medieval version of luxury. You take a step back, survey your handiwork, and sigh. Laundry day may be long, loud, and full of mysterious puddles, but when it's done, you sleep better. Literally. Because that cleanish shift you're putting on tonight, it's softer now, warm from the fire. And for the first time in a week, it doesn't itch. Miraculous. You stretch as the dusk settles, and another earthy-smelling breeze drifts through the gaps in your shutters. It's time for a communal ritual that somehow merges survival, gossip, and modest decency. It's bath night. Or, well, it might be bath night. You're not entirely sure. Bathing isn't a daily thing. It's not even weekly for most. But tonight, the stars align, the tub's been dragged out, and there's a faint scent of soap in the air. Someone, somewhere, is boiling water. Bathing in the medieval world is a delicate dance of timing, temperature, and public propriety. You live in a village, so there's no grand bathhouse with steaming pools and stone benches. That's more of a city luxury. But you've heard tales of places where men and women shared baths, drank wine while scrubbing their armpits, and sometimes got up to extracurricular rinsing. Historians still argue whether these bathhouses were more health spa or pickup joint. For you, a bath means a big wooden tub, often the same one used for laundry or cider making earlier in the week. It takes hours to fill, with bucket after bucket from the well or river, followed by pots of boiled water to chase off the chill. You help carry one of those pots, steam curling against your cheeks, and dump it into the tub with a satisfying slosh. The water is finally warm enough to not feel like melted snow. You get to go second, which, honestly, is not ideal. Bathing goes in order of rank or age. Parents, elders, honored guests, and then the rest of the household, like you. By the time it's your turn, the water has taken on a new color, and a gentle skin has formed on top. You try not to think too hard about it. The important part is that it's warm, and wet, and possibly still better than not bathing. You step in slowly, hissing at the temperature even though it's only tepid now. The soap is a soft, gray lump, homemade, scented faintly of tallow and herbs. It doesn't lather so much as smear, but it works. You scrub at your limbs with a rough cloth, lifting away layers of dust, ash, and pig pen debris. Flecks of straw float to the surface. You pretend they're herbs. There's no shower head, no shampoo, no bath bomb fizzing in the water. But there is rosemary. Someone threw in a handful of dried sprigs, both for the scent and the supposed purification. You breathe it in and imagine you're in a spa. A damp, crowded, turnip-scented spa where someone just knocked over your drying socks. Your hair takes extra effort. Long or short, it's matted from days or weeks of sweat, smoke, and hat wearing. You got a wooden comb that pulls more than it parts, and you wince with each stroke. Your scalp feels tender, like it's being exorcised. Still, by the end, your hair is wet, your skin is red, and your spirit is ever so slightly elevated. There's a kind of rebirth that happens after a bath, even a shared one in someone else's bathwater. You dry off with a rough towel and dress in your freshly laundered shift. It's the closest you've come to feeling new. Sure, your fingernails are still black at the edges, and your feet look like they've been in medieval combat, but the grime is gone. You smell vaguely of rosemary and wet wool. You're glowing. Bathing habits vary wildly, depending on the region and era. Some nobles bathe monthly, sometimes with attendants who pour rose water and brush them like prize ponies. Others are wary of soaking the body too often, believing that hot water opens the pores and invites sickness. You've heard both arguments. You mostly follow the wash when the itch becomes unbearable rule. Children are often dunked together, splashing and giggling in wooden basins. Elderly folk are wiped down with cloths rather than fully bathed. And in lean months, like deep winter, people go unwashed for weeks, surviving on sponge baths and denial. You once spent January wearing the same tunic, turning it inside out halfway through for freshness. It didn't work. Still, the desire to be clean is there, always. Monasteries promote regular washing, at least of the hands and face. Clean body, clean soul, they say. Pilgrims wash before entering shrines. Brides bathe before weddings. Knights get scrubbed before dubbing ceremonies. Cleanliness in key moments becomes symbolic, almost sacred. And let's not forget the traveling bath merchants. Yes, that's a real thing. In larger towns, you've seen men with carts, hauling bathtubs, buckets, and bundles of soap. They rent you a bath for the night, set it up in your courtyard or tavern room, and then disappear before anyone can ask about drainage. It's wildly impractical. It's also weirdly a hit. Of course, none of this helps with lice. Lice are eternal. Bathing helps, but only for a while. You comb, you pick, you boil your linens. But eventually, the little pests come back, clinging to seams, hiding in cloaks, mocking your rosemary sprigs. You once shaved your head out of desperation and wore a cap for a month. It worked, sort of. Now your hair grows back unevenly and carries a vendetta. There are powders and ointments, some made from crushed herbs, others from more alarming substances. One woman uses quicksilver. Another swears by goose fat. You just try not to sleep too close to anyone scratching furiously. After bathing, there's a sense of clarity, of space around your skin. You move more freely. You feel lighter, less like a walking compost pile. You drink some ale, eat something starchy, and sit near the fire while your hair dries. It's a good feeling. Not everyone shares your enthusiasm, of course. Some folks wash only twice a year, usually around religious festivals. Others believe bathing is a waste of precious fuel and water. And then there are the fringe thinkers, the ones who bathe in milk or wine, or believe standing in a thunderstorm counts as cleansing. You once saw a man roll in snow and claim he was invigorated. He was also blue. You tuck into bed that night with a clean shift, damp curls, and the comforting ache of someone who has manually removed a week's worth of dirt. It's not glamour. It's not a spa. But it's enough. And the best part, you get to skip bath duty for another week. Maybe 2. Maybe 3 if you avoid particularly smelly tasks. And if anyone comments, well, they can wait their turn for the tub. The days roll on, and with them come the quiet, crusty realities of medieval hygiene that don't make it into the ballads. The small, persistent routines that patch together a world where survival trumps sparkle. But today, as you rise with the sun and stretch your not quite clean limbs, it's time to face one final frontier of freshness, your teeth. You don't exactly brush them. Not the way you do in modern times, with soft bristled tools and minty foam. No electric hum. No bathroom mirror. What you do have is a stick, often a frayed twig from a tree like hazel or birch. You chew the end until it splays out, making a makeshift brush, then rub it along your teeth. It's primitive, sure, but you're doing more than many around you. Dental hygiene in the Middle Ages is all over the place. Some people cared, some didn't, and most just worked with what they had. You've heard older folks say if your teeth don't ache, leave them alone, which is a comforting philosophy until the day one does ache. You rinse with cold water. Sometimes if you're feeling fancy or have a sore gum, you'll steep some sage or mint in hot water and swish that around. There's a sort of toothpaste too, though the recipes are concerning. Crushed salt, pepper, ash, and sometimes even powdered bones or brick. You've tried one. It tasted like regret and scraped your tongue raw. Despite all this, medieval people didn't necessarily have terrible teeth. Their diets, low in processed sugar and high in coarse bread and vegetables, helped keep cavities at bay. Bread crusts acted like natural floss. But when decay hit, it hit hard. There were no dentists, just barber surgeons with pliers and questionable ethics. You've seen a tooth pulled in the village square once. The screaming stayed with you for days. To mask bad breath, people chewed herbs, parsley, fennel, anise. You do the same, partly out of tradition, partly because you like how it makes your breath feel less like a sheep pen. Nobles had access to cloves and cinnamon, but you settle for whatever grows in your garden. Historians still argue whether people clean their teeth daily or only during special occasions, but you know what you do. Every few days at least. You've got a pride streak, and you're not about to let your molars rot out just because water is cold and sage tastes like candle wax. As the day moves on, you handle the last few hygiene-related chores on your weekly checklist. First, trimming your nails. Not with clippers, those haven't arrived yet, but with a small knife you keep just for the job. The blade's dull, the angle's awkward, but it gets the job done. You scrape, you nip, and you try not to cut too deep. Infection's always lurking. Then, there's the ever-present threat of body odor. You've already bathed this week, miraculous, but that doesn't mean you can relax. Sweat accumulates. Fabric clings. You've taken to rubbing rosemary and thyme into your underarms, like some kind of medieval deodorant. It helps. A little. For really persistent smells, there are perfumes if you're lucky. Most are homemade tinctures of alcohol and flowers. You've got one tiny vial tucked away, made from violets and vinegar. It's for special occasions, or when someone important visits. You dab a drop on your wrist and feel immediately 10% more sophisticated, even if your feet still smell like bog water. And of course, there's hair maintenance. Lice and fleas love hair. You comb daily, rough wooden teeth scraping your scalp, catching more than they miss. You've tried rinsing with vinegar once, your scalp tingled for hours. There are powders too, chalky mixes of herbs and clay to absorb grease. Your hair smells like a walking herb garden, which is kind of the goal. Wounds, rashes, weird bumps, those are all dealt with using salves and superstition. Honey helps, so does garlic, sometimes goose fat. You once had a boil treated with a poultice of mashed beans and chicken grease. It worked. Probably. At least the boil went away, and you didn't. And while you're not one to judge, you do side-eye people who never wash their bedding. That's next on your list. Dragging straw mattresses outside, airing linens, beating out the dust and mites. You remember once reading, or rather hearing someone say, that noble women would line their beds with scented herbs like lavender and wormwood to repel pests and encourage good dreams. You tried it. You had a dream about a talking goat. Seemed worth it. To keep your skin from cracking, especially in winter, you rub it with animal fat. It's greasy, yes, but effective. Your hands feel soft after, though you smell faintly of stew. In noble circles, they might use almond oil or even imported balms from the East. You've seen them once, glittering in little jars, costing more than a cow. You stick with lard. By the end of the day, as the hearth glows and you settle down with the same itchy blanket and the cleanish shift from 2 sections ago, you realize that you've done it. You've survived another week of medieval hygiene. You're not spotless, but you're cleaner than most. You've dodged the worst of the lice, avoided the plague, and even managed a partial hair rinse. Not bad for someone living in a time when bathing was suspect and soap was basically an angry paste. You lie down, sniff the air, only mildly offensive, and let your thoughts drift. And now, gently, we ease into the final breath of our medieval journey. Let the fire die low now. Its light flickers softly against the timber beams, casting long, lazy shadows that stretch like cats across the floor. Your skin is warm from earlier, your muscles loose with weariness, and your breath moves gently in and out, like a bellows slowly resting. You've made it through the mud, the bathwater, the fleas, and the lie. You've done laundry with numb fingers, bathed in secondhand soup, and brushed your teeth with twigs and chalk. And somehow still you've emerged, weathered, yes, but oddly satisfied. Think of the flickering torchlight in stone corridors, of rosemary drying in bundles above a smoky hearth, of the silence that comes after a full day's chores. You're wrapped in that quiet now, soft and hushed, like linen against freshly scrubbed skin. Let your thoughts blur at the edges. There are no more tubs to empty, no cloaks to beat clean, no lice to chase tonight. Just the steady rhythm of sleep drawing closer. Your breath slows. The air thickens with peace. You've been there, trudging through muck, ducking chamber pots, laughing with the washerwomen. Now you're here, safe and still, drifting somewhere between the past and dreams. Let it all fade. The itch, the dirt, the ache, gone now. Only comfort remains. And if you dream tonight of soft soap and lavender-scented pillows, well, who could blame you?